Hey, I'm Summer.
And I'm Mike.
And we got married.
With children.
We're married 2 years now.
Blended for 11.
Like a margarita.
Yeah, baby, like a margarita.
And you're listening to the Everything Always podcast.
Want to tell them why we do this?
We do this because blending families isn't easy. There's step-parenting, co-parenting, his ex,
Her ex.
schedules, sibling rivalry,
Money issues.
custody issues.
Dating and relationship issues.
It's a whole lot of stuff.
Blended with a whole lot of good stuff.
And we're here to talk about all of it because we've done most of it.
We might not be experts, but we've learned a lot.
And we're still learning, and we want to share that with you.
Thanks for joining. Now let's go. Hey, welcome back. This is part 2 of our podcast on the topic of parental alienation. In our last part 1 episode, we talked about the signs, we talked about the damage that can occur, the culture around parental alienation, and now we're going to be discussing what types of triggers can cause this, what are the possible solutions, what are children's roles, and how do they affect what's going on in regards to this, and most importantly, the possible solutions that can be achieved if you know what to do. So here we go.
So I'm going into this next section, which is also really important. Let me give credit here to Richard Allen Gardner, who was a child psychiatrist. He was known for his work in psychotherapy with children, especially dealing with parental alienation. And in fact, he introduced the term PAS, parental alienation syndrome. He noted that parental alienation syndrome results from the combination of a programming, brainwashing, of a parent's indoctrinations, and this is why I'm going into this next section, the child's own contributions to the vilification of the targeted parent. So we're talking a lot about the parent and how they're, contributing to what a child thinks of the parent they're being alienated from, but they play a part in this as well. So Gardner thought that PAS was more than brainwashing or programming because the child had to actually participate in the denigrating of the alienated parent, which is so true because if you think about it, you could say if a child, was strong enough at the time to say, hey, that's my dad you're talking about. And I love dad. And actually, I have seen this before. I've actually seen this before where a child has been strong enough to say, please don't say anything negative about my dad. Hey, mom, I really love him, and which is to me is just amazing. That does happen.
Strong kid.
But in most cases, that we're still developing, we're learning to even formulate opinions and independence and all of that. So in this case, the child does have to participate. So let's see what that looks like, because I think this is really key and it was very eye-opening to me. So he outlined 8 ways that he saw this played out. The first one is the child denigrated the alienated parent with foul language and severe oppositional behavior. 2, the child offered weak, absurd, or frivolous reasons for his or her anger. 3, the child was sure of himself or herself and doesn't demonstrate ambivalence. Example, love and hate for the alienated parent. It's just hate. 4, the child exhorted that he or she alone came up with the ideas of denigration. The quote unquote independent thinker phenomenon is where the child asserts that no one told him to do this. 5, the child supported and felt a need to protect the alienating parent. 6, the child did not demonstrate guilt over cruelty towards the alienated parent. 7, the child used borrowed scenarios or vividly described situations that he or she could not have experienced. 8, animosity spread to the friends and or extended family of the alienated parent. So that's like a lot of stuff. I mean, if you look at these, a little bit in depth, it's, the child, joining in on the let's hate mom party. If dad is saying all these negative things about mom, your mom's just not fit, or she's, she cares about her boyfriends more than she does you, or whatever. And then child is going in like, yeah, mom's this, mom's that, and saying negative things to the parent as well. And this one stuck out to me too. Weak, absurd, or frivolous reasons for his or her anger. Things like, well, hey, little Jimmy. I don't know why I always use Jimmy. Why did Jimmy become the name when you're talking about a boy?
I don't know.
Jimmy. No, nothing. I don't mean anything for anyone named Jimmy listening, but no, but that looks like, well, hey, Jimmy, why are you so mad at me? Well, you said I could have that Snickers in my lunchbox and now you're not letting me. Or you said I could have my own room, but you haven't made it happen yet. Or you said, we were going to go get ice cream and you had to reschedule it. Things that are, yeah, totally understand. But it's like, it becomes like this, I'm so angry at you. So that's like child participating or contributing to this.
It's important to also just keep in mind that a lot of times, maybe it's not even those situations where you're saying something to your child. Be mindful when you're saying bad things about the other person to your friends or on a phone call to someone else.
Well, yes, but that's not.
But the thing is that you're basically doing the same thing.
Right. But what we're talking about here is the child and how they're contributing, how what we're learning here is that both contribute to.
Oh, they team up.
Yes.
Yeah.
The child really feels like they have to protect the alienated parent, which goes kind of into that enmeshment thing. It's just like, I might not be, I'm going to say things that, mom quoted because she's talked about this a lot. And now I'm going to bring up this story and I'm going to keep talking about. In other words, you had said this actually, it becomes their narrative. So whether they've come up with this story themselves, it's their narrative now these are their thoughts now. This is my story. What, this parent that I am sort of codependent with, their story about their dislike has now become my story of how I dislike this parent. Anyway, so there, that was a lot there. And I thought that was very eye-opening that, it gets to the point where children are contributing to this as well. In severe cases of parental alienation, Gardner actually said that the child is utterly brainwashed against the alienated parent. The alienator can truthfully say that the child doesn't want to spend any time with his parent, even though he or she has told him that he has to. It's a court order. So basically what he's saying is that there's so much brainwashing going on that now when the child says, I don't want to go to dad's house, well, of course they don't. And it's truthfully being said. Gardner said that the alienator will typically respond with, there isn't anything that I can do about it. I'm not telling him he can't see you. So you might not be saying that, but you've led up to that. You have constructed a situation where the child is now going, of course I don't want, secretly inside you're going, yeah. Well, of course I don't want to go there after all that you've said and all, this is now my opinion of dad or mom. So something, that's really important to note here is that children are so impressionable. They worry about what other people think. They form opinions based on what will make them feel accepted amongst their peers. And this narrative based on those influences is what's been formed. And in the case of parental alienation, the child takes on the narrative of the alienator. And it's huge to recognize. It's sad, but it's really true. It's not their own opinion that they have gotten to form based on their own experience. And like you said before, it might be that they actually think it is their own opinion. Yes. And here's the thing. If mom or dad is somebody that's not involved, or maybe, you think is not so healthy or whatever that is, if there is no abuse going on, if there's no damage or anything, remember, we've said this so many times before, let them form their own opinion. At least give them a shot at having that relationship. It might not be what you consider to be the ideal relationship, but let them have that and let them know that you support that. That is a gift that you can give them. And later on, they might say, dad didn't really show up much for this or that. Let them come up with that, not because you gave them the narrative of that. Because if you can support it, then you actually give them the opportunity for the other parent to hear that and perhaps work on that and repair that. Okay, so now I want to go into why alienators act the way that they do, as well as how the child gets involved in it. I want you to see signs here. This is going back to Dr. Jane Major. She's such a huge resource. So I'm obviously like, should she hear this? She's going to hear all of her work because it's just so great. This is like super eye-opening and like If you are somebody who is if you are the alienator, if you are somebody who has been alienated, if you are a child who's been alienated from a parent, this should be, we're getting into some psychology here, but it was very interesting to me. She believes that PAS parents get stuck in the first stage of child development where survival and skills are learned. They feel that having control over their child is a life and death matter. This is where we get into that enmeshment stuff. They can't separate themselves from their child. They don't understand how to please other people unless there are strings attached. They tend to take and not give. So severe descriptions of PAS cases, according to Dr. Major, are when the parent is unable to see the child as a separate human being from him or herself. The parent, she says, is self-centered or narcissistic and enmeshed, which basically, again, means they're overly involved with the child. Because of this, they have entitlement to whatever they want when it comes to the child. They're unable to see the situation through anyone else's eyes. There isn't empathy for the child. They can't distinguish true and lying the way others would. So we're about to go into what can be done about this, but in all the research that I've done, most PAS experts have said that the prognosis for severely alienated parents is poor. But don't give up hope, because I'm going to go into things you can do. But it is something that is not just something that they can get over or will ever stop. It's very difficult for them to see that they are doing this. I've talked about this like in our past episode that we did on narcissism. Many people think that you can just send a list of traits to a narcissist. Like, hey, here's the traits of a narcissist.
See, you're one. Now change.
Yeah, like that person's going to have this big light bulb go off and they're going to be like, oh my gosh, you're right. I'm going to change my ways. They won't. And that's just part of the trait. And it's the same in this case. You could send all of this to the alienator and be like, hey, listen to this episode. I would say, we always say, be bold enough to share it with someone you don't like. share it with someone you love. Be bold enough to share it with someone you don't. However, the odds are against them going, oh my gosh, I didn't realize I was doing this whole time. I'm going to change. It could happen in a mild case. I think they said that about narcissism. Some, if you're like borderline, there are things that you can do. You have to really see that this is what you're doing and want to change. And if that happens, like I said earlier in the episode, that's amazing, and that you're super emotionally mature, and that is awesome. But don't count that's going to happen.
Hey, thank you so much for listening to our podcast.
Yes, we appreciate you so much, and we hope you know that we support you in whatever stage you're at.
We took a leap here, sharing our mistakes and wins with you.
Yeah, we're getting pretty vulnerable here, but we know that we've learned from those who have been brave enough to share with us, and we want to do that with you.
Hey, can you do us a favor? If you like what you hear, will you press pause and rate the podcast and write a review?
Oh, and while you're at it, share it, please.
And if you have questions, you can find us on all of our social channels.
Okay, ready to get back to it?
Let's do it.
Okay, so let's look at this going back to how this gets stuck in that first stage of child development. So in many cases, when a child is born, it's the mother that they are mostly reliant on, which is totally normal. They're the primary caregiver, and it's the mom's job to help that child become their own person. So we as mothers, it's up to us in the stages from infancy to toddler and throughout childhood. It's our job to teach them to do things so that they can be self-reliant, like self-soothing back to sleep, or potty training, toilet training, eating themselves, taking care of themselves, brush your teeth, wash your hands, flush the toilet after you go to the bathroom. But in the case of an alienating parent, they are doing things that encourage dependence instead of fostering independence. Our job is to get you equipped to be an independent person. But in the case of an alienating parent, they're encouraging dependence because they want to be at one. They want that enmeshment. It makes them feel secure and in control. So things like, sleeping with your child up until adolescent years, or not allowing them to make mistakes, protecting them from having, from feelings of failure, or, doing homework for them or doing things for them so that they don't mess up, cleaning up after them and never, giving them the responsibility of hey, take care of your things, clean the kitchen, do these things so that they can be capable adults. And so it's things like the parents calling every hour or frequent calls when they're with the other parent just to see what's going on. Are you okay? What's this? What's that? Telling the other parent, hey, they're uncomfortable there. They're doing this. They're doing that. I've seen that happen where it's like, it's the parents' time with their children and they've got their, ex-wife or father calling to say, so-and-so's not having a good time or so-and-so's this or so. It's like, let them be their own advocate. Let them get through it. You don't need to be on top of them the whole time. Really try to, encourage that independence. In the case of the alienator, they're wanting that dependence. They're wanting to be in control. Something that we've talked about, Mike, you and I have talked about, is things like an example, like a child goes out on an outing with another parent, spends the day with mom, say, and daughter comes back to her father and daughter actually had this really good time. And she's like, mom and I, thinking in her mind, mom and I had this really great shopping day. We got mani-pedis. We did all this.
Obviously had a great time. Comes home to dad and dad is like, how did it go? And she has this guilt of like, oh crap, I can't let dad, it was actually not that awesome.
It wasn't that fun. Yeah, didn't have a good time, and is saying these negative things because of this codependency. It's this fear of disappointing dad.
Breaking up their team.
They
have a common enemy.
That's how
they connect.
Yeah, my dad and I, we're against mom together, and this is how we bond, and this is this. So I can't tell dad that I had this great time with mom. And so they, and then what happens? Dad says to mom, well, little Susie said, she did not have a good time. So just wanted to let you know. It's like, what? But we had this great time. So things like that, just giving you an example of some consequences. Okay, now let's get into what you're probably waiting for. Okay, I get all this. I'm totally seeing the signs. I see the consequences. What the heck do I do? Like, what do I do?
Yeah.
I think we know the danger. We know the danger of if nothing gets done. We've gone through all of that. It's scary. I've asked myself in situations when I've seen cases like this, I go, hey, is the day ever going to come that like this person grows up and realizes what happened to them? And, I think the thing is that without someone who can recognize the syndrome and counsel them about it with them, which of course they have to be open to even receiving, it's not likely, no, that they're going to figure it out. I think some people hope like, well, I guess I just have this estranged relationship with my child. I'm just going to let them be. I'm not going to nudge them every day. I'm not going to, I'm not going to try to interfere too much. One day they'll grow up and realize it. I mean, truthfully, they may not ever realize that. So again, like we said earlier, keep pushing to be in their life. And also, if you think that this episode would be well received, because that's its whole purpose is for you to become aware of this.
I mean, maybe share it with the person so that they wait a second, maybe I am actually going to cause massive damage to this thing that
right.
At the end of the day, you do love your kids. You just are making mistakes potentially in doing things that you don't know you're doing.
Right.
And maybe with knowledge, you could make a change.
That, I mean, the very first step in what can be done is awareness on all parties.
Yeah.
But you can't just throw it at somebody either, because they're not likely to see it right away. It's kind of like if you see
mechanism is going to go up, and then it's going to.
Yeah. Like I think of girlfriends and stuff, if you're like, hey, I've seen this before. I've had friends where we're having an intervention because we think her boyfriend is like years and years ago. We think her boyfriend is verbally abusive. Like he's horrible to her. Right. And so you're like, we're going to have this intervention. Well, if you've accepted this person all this time, then all of a sudden you're just like, hey, Sally, your boyfriend is awful to you and you need to get out of this. It's abusive. It's this, it's that. It's like, whoa, you're taking somebody who's now established this as part of their everyday life. This is their norm. This is their comfort zone. And you're now telling them that they're in a dangerous situation and need to get out. They're not going to hear it the way you want them to hear it. They're not going to see it the way you're seeing it. You have to as that term goes, you have to put out little breadcrumbs, right? Like little things that make them start to go, maybe that is something I should pay attention to. It's like, even with like health and nutrition, you can't just all of a sudden be like, eliminate all these 7 foods and just be like, oh, it's going to be so shocking. But if you can kind of, take baby steps to it of going, what, I do feel better when I exercise. Maybe there is something to this no fried food thing too. Maybe I'll stop that. You know what I mean? It's like bits and pieces. But if you overwhelm, it's going to be too much. So definitely you need to be clear on the problem. And if you think that, this is something that is happening and you're able to seek help, then seek help of a psychiatrist and clinical psychologist who are experts on this matter. Make sure that they know what this is. There are forensic evaluators that can also diagnose this through a series of psychological tests. So if you are in a position where you're like, I need to take this legally, try to seek out legal experts that know what this is, because to be honest, a lot of courts they don't know. Judges are not aware of, not that they're not aware.
They're dealing with so much other stuff sometimes.
They're not, they're not psychologists. They're not psychiatrists. Yeah. So it has to be presented to them like this is something real.
So ask the question
that's happening
when you're looking for somebody. Hey, are you familiar with this? Are you an expert in this? Do you understand the long-term effects of this?
Yeah, exactly. Yes, you can take this to court. So just make sure you do your research on that and look up, those forensic evaluators for real. There are certain tests that they can do to clarify that this is indeed happening. And of course, as we said earlier, it's really how hard that you fight for it. If you're going to give up and say it's not going to, nothing I can do about it, well, then there probably is nothing you can do about it.
Don't give up.
Don't give up. You wouldn't want your parent to give up on you. I promise you that. So even if you are being met with hate or opposition, keep at it. The big question is, can alienation be undone? Well, with this awareness, with this research, with the right mental health plan and psychological care, it totally can be undone, but it can only work if either the alienating parent is willing to make these changes or if they are contained. And what I mean by that is just like in an abusive relationship, you have to be away from it in order to see what's going on. So
and that's why a lot of times it doesn't come out until, the kid is
because they've had distance.
An adult.
Yeah.
And they're away and they're like, wait a second, my life experiences are showing me something different.
Yeah.
Than really what's going on.
Sometimes it's, child moves out, they're an adult now, or they're going to college and they're like, they're more open to seeing that parent who they had that strained relationship with. Their alienator parent is not on top of them as much. And they're starting to see things differently. Like, oh, there's a little bit, I'm starting to get some clarity on things. It's kind of like that relationship where you go, wow, I didn't realize that I could have this type of a relationship with somebody that's so good. Man, was I blinded. So yes, it can happen, but you've got to be away from the toxicity. So really, yes, the healing can begin when we seek to heal. We have to see the wrong, and then we have to provide an environment that supports that healing. Okay, so the best way to deal with this, I'm again going to take this directly from Dr. Major again, because there were many, many parents who were very successful in getting primary custody of their children and getting control of a PAS situation. And again, if you are like, I don't know if I have the fight in me, well, you have the fight in you, especially if it's important to you. And here are the things that you can do if you are a parent who is willing to fight and if you are the one being alienated. So here they are. Complete a comprehensive parenting course, such as Breakthrough Parenting, which we can have a link in the show notes for, by Dr. Major. Completing that course and sticking around until they know they've got the knowledge and the skills and the methods, and really their parenting skills became superior. Remember, this is important, especially if you are taking this into legal matters. Other parents that were super successful in this, they were even-tempered. They were logical. They kept their emotions under control. They never retaliated. Remember that a person who reacts in anger is proving the alienator's point that he or she is unstable. Please think about that. They thought of giving up, but they never did. No matter how awful the harassment got, they worried about leaving their daughter or son in that environment. What is the damage that does and in their future relationships? And they were driven to continue trying to get the court to understand the seriousness of the issues and to change primary custody to them. They were willing and able to go to the financial expense of seeing it through. I know that is so hard. They got legal representations from a skilled family lawyer who knew what parental alienation syndrome was and had great experience with it. The parent became good at understanding how the courts work and the law as it applied to their case. They often ended up as a proper representing themselves because of excessive expenses. These were parents that had a case where a forensic evaluator made a strong statement about the alienation and recommended changing legal and primary custody to the alienated parent. That's why I'm like, hey, research that. Some parents had to go back to the evaluator to demonstrate that his or her earlier recommendations were not working. These are parents that had persevered in demonstrating that they were rational, reasonable, and had the best interest of the child at heart. These were parents that, even though they and their children were being victimized, they understood the nature of the problem and focused more on what to do about it. Alienated parents who got caught up in how terrible it is and just spent time judging the situation, they went under. You've got to be so strong in a situation like this and really keep your emotions under control. Cry in the dark or cry alone, but try to keep yourself together because you really will avoid adding to the problem as a whole. One father expressed, this is again from Dr. Major, expressed it like this: I don't know how to make it better with the mother, but I do know how to make it worse. He was actually one of her most successful parents that she met who really stayed in the role of peacekeeper. Keep a diary or journal of key events. This is stuff that can be admissible in court. Always called or showed up to pick up their children. So even if things are done like, oh, they went out of town, you show up to pick up that child just to show that you are there and you're going through with your effort. I'm here. We had this dinner arranged. We had this visitation arranged. Make sure that you are showing up for that as much as you can to show that you are. And if the other parent has, not shown up, that will be on them. And really just focus on enjoying the time that you do have with your child, and don't talk about this with them. Don't talk about the case. Like, what will happen is eventually the child will realize that you took the high road. You weren't the one that ever talked badly about the parent, the alienator. You kept it to, this is our time together. This is about our relationship. And this is so important. We've said this before, and Dr. Major is also advising this as well, is do not talk to the children. If you are in court, never talk to them about what the court orders are or, sensitive documents, or they don't need to know about that. They don't need to know about the money, the drama that's going on. They don't need to hear those inappropriate conversations. Again, that is brain damage. And then also just really stay true to your principles and who you are, because you know how much you love your children. Stick with those, because if you stick with those, good will happen. If you don't stick with those, you've got more working against you. These are definitely the most difficult cases to figure out, even professionals that are dealing with this in the field of divorce. And even once it's brought to awareness, it is even harder to figure out what to do about it. So the most important thing in all of my research and in our opinion is to really be connected, be supported by compassionate people who are going through such a difficult time. And, this is hard stuff, and it's so worth it. And I know that if this were you, and maybe you're hearing this and saying, that was me as a child, that this is what you would want. You'd want that person to fight for you. And we're often not really aware that we are capable of voicing this. And we don't know, it's things that you have deep inside, but all you know how to express is anger, because that gets the response you want from the alienating parent. I really hope that this was helpful to you. I know there was a lot. We had to break this out into 2 parts because it's intense and it's a lot. And I really hope that this is helpful.
Thank you so much for listening to our podcast. Our goal is to bring you all kinds of value that will help you navigate these challenging waters of blending a family.
Reach out to us if there's something specific you want to hear.
And don't forget to rate, and subscribe to the podcast.
And if you really like it, share with someone you love.
Ooh, and be bold enough to share it with someone you don't.